The Formula One season officially began in a very emblematic manner, marked by the first major backstage controversy, where several teams appear to be finding loopholes in the rules to their own advantage. The spotlight turned to McLaren, now accused of reactivating the old mini DRS trick from the previous season. And the surprising element is that Ferrari may also be using the same strategy. The impasse intensified during the preparatory tests in Bahrain, when keen observers identified dubious movements on the rear wing of both setups. This immediately triggered an alert, as the situation strongly recalls last year's controversy, when McLaren was denounced for exploiting a flexible wing design to gain an advantage on the straights. However, now Ferrari also seems to have joined the fray, a fact that has not pleased Red Bull in the slightest. During last week's tests, the Ferrari team leader Fred Vasseur and the Red Bull manager Christian Horner demonstrated a rare convergence of opinions by praising the efforts of the International Automobile Federation to clarify the rules regarding flexible front wings. Yet, just as it seemed that the issue was coming to a close, new onboard camera images emerged showing questionable situations at the rear of the cars from both McLaren and Ferrari. An unidentified team director, clearly following the case closely, told the press that when analyzing the videos, he noticed that some rear wings exhibited excessive flexibility. According to this expert, that behavior, which encompasses both Ferrari and McLaren, is being closely observed. The controversy surrounding the mini DRS began in the previous season, when McLaren was suspected of employing a mechanism that widened the gap in its rear wing at high speeds, effectively functioning as an auxiliary drag reduction system. This maneuver allowed the car to slice through the air with less resistance, providing an extra boost on the straights. It was a very subtle trick until their rivals noticed the advantage and turned to the International Automobile Federation, forcing the team to make adjustment. Now, indications point to both Ferrari and McLaren having found a way to adjust the entire structure of the rear wing, tilting it slightly backwards under high aerodynamic load to achieve a similar effect. Red Bull's technical director Pierre Wash is not convinced that the issue has been resolved, asserting that the problem persists. In his view, Ferrari and McLaren still seem to be using the mini DRS trick. The main issue is that the preparatory tests are not subject to a full compliance check by the International Automobile Federation, allowing the teams to push the limits without facing immediate penalties. However, when the cars finally take to the track for the official start of the season in Melbourne at the Grand Prix in 2025, any deviation from the rules may result in protests, forced modifications, or even severe sanctions. For instance, Pierre Wash believes that the problem will become undeniable when the Grand Prix of Australia begins, as the irregularity will be impossible to ignore. The Federation had already attempted to curb such maneuvers on the rear wing before, after McLaren's controversial design made a significant impact at the Grand Prix of Azerbaijan in 2024. Among the changes implemented, the permitted width of the gap was reduced from 10 to 15 millimeters to 9.4 to 13 millimeters, while the upper limit for the DRS opening remained at 85 millimeters. Additionally, a new rule was introduced stipulating that the DRS structure must be either fully open or completely closed, eliminating any possibility of gradual flexing. In other words, no subtle modulation is allowed. The DRS must operate in a binary manner, either on or off. Article 310.10 of the Formula One Technical Regulations makes this absolutely clear, except in cases of a DRS failure or transition between positions. According to this rule, the DRS structure may only have two configurations, remaining the same before and after each activation, and the transition time between these positions must be less than 400 milliseconds. Moreover, the Federation introduced additional reinforcement in the rules governing rear-wing designs. However, if Ferrari and McLaren have indeed identified a loophole, the situation could quickly become complicated. Recalling the incident involving McLaren in the previous season, the key difference lay in how the rear wing reacted to aerodynamic forces. Normally, each car has a gap between the flaps of the rear wing, and this opening must remain within the regulated range of 10 to 15 millimeters when the DRS is closed. However, McLaren's unique wing design allowed a slight flex, widening this gap at high speeds, and simulating the effect of the DRS even when it was not activated. The current suspicions regarding Ferrari and McLaren revolve around a similar concept. Observations indicate that the rear wings of these teams may be mounted in such a way that, under high aerodynamic load, the entire structure tilts subtly backwards, creating an unintended DRS effect. This characteristic would explain why the gap appears more pronounced compared to other teams. A closer analysis of the design reveals that while most teams feature a slight curvature in their rear wing, McLaren's and Ferrari's setups appear almost flat at certain angles, which might allow the gap to open more vertically rather than angularly, possibly their secret to extracting extra straight-line speed. With the first race of the season approaching, all eyes will be on the International Automobile Federation, awaiting any intervention regarding McLaren and Ferrari. If the teams file formal protests in Melbourne, it is likely that a thorough investigation and a redefinition of the rules will follow, similar to what happened before. McLaren has already experienced this process and, after adjusting its design to comply with the requirements, is undoubtedly aware of the risks involved. As for Ferrari, this would not be the first technical controversy the team has faced, nor is it expected to be the last. Red Bull, which was initially expected to be the first to raise the issue, now shows some discontent, considering that its performance does not seem as dominant as in previous seasons. After many years at the top, they may be feeling the pressure for the first time. Max Verstappen concluded the tests in Bahrain with mixed feelings, admitting that there is still much to improve before the season starts. With his new teammate Liam Lawson taking on double duties the previous day, Verstappen took the wheel for the final test session in the Sakhir Desert, putting the RB21 under considerable pressure. At the end of the day, the four-time world champion recorded the second-best time, finishing just 0.0201 seconds behind George Russell of Mercedes after completing 81 laps. "I believe we had a decent day today," Verstappen reflected. "We encountered some setbacks, but overall we managed to accomplish a good portion of what was necessary. Although second place is not the worst result, we still have areas to improve," he added. "It was as expected, so we will continue working, refining our performance, and hoping to have a clearer picture of our situation when we arrive in Melbourne." After analyzing the data, it is difficult to assess how our rivals are performing. Therefore, we need to focus on our own development, and we are looking forward to returning to racing with full intensity in Australia. Meanwhile, Red Bull's technical director Pierre Wash revealed that he was not completely satisfied with the performance of the RB21, pointing out that at certain moments the car did not respond as expected, and the improvements fell short of what was desired. This is an issue that will need to be addressed for both the first race and the remainder of the season. Returning to the main topic, whether the International Automobile Federation will take strict measures depends on the performance advantage that this trick is providing. Should McLaren and Ferrari begin consistently leading the maximum speed measurements in Melbourne, we might see protests arising as quickly as a Red Bull on the straight. With the regulations constantly being tightened to avoid the misuse of flexible aerodynamics, it remains to be seen whether Ferrari and McLaren will have to modify their designs before the Grand Prix of Australia, given that the regulating body has already set precedents with previous controversies involving rear wing. It is likely that the situation will be under intense scrutiny in the coming days.